So welcome tonight to who we are, to the Braver Angels of Central Arkansas. We are a group of citizens just like you who came together to try to build better relationships and humanize each other across the political divide. We are not just red or blue or purple. Before I joined this organization, I didn't even know what red and blue stood for. I had political opinions, but I didn't know what they were called. And we really have a passion that our political beliefs can lead us to important social action to improve our communities. But in order to do that, we have to get beyond the political divide and get to know each other in relationships. Right now, the Braver Angels group is actually nationally is putting together some initiatives in this election season that are showing their desire to create opportunities for dialogue. They just finished a month-long dialogue series on race matters, in a very timely topic in relationship to what's been happening with the protest in our cities. And they've done debates, they've had podcasts, they've had groups of people that have been panel discussions from a variety of different perspectives. And each one of those that I've watched has helped me understand the perspectives of different people a lot better, which is amazing. This fall, they're actually putting together an initiative called With Malice Towards None. And I'm actually trying to get the university to be involved with that and involve student leadership there, but they're involving religious congregations and universities and colleges, as well as civic groups. And what they're trying to do is to try to have some ways of decreasing some of the emotional things that are right now. The emotions are so heightened around the election. And so they're trying to create opportunities for reds to talk to each other, for blues to talk to each other, but also to talk across the red-blue divide, so that regardless of what happens with the election, that we can be realizing that we can appreciate the others that are with us. And so if you're interested in any of those initiatives, especially the With Malice Towards None, if you're part of a religious congregation that might be, you think might be interested in that, then you can send an email to Glenn or me, and we'll give you our email addresses at the end of tonight's session, and we can get you connected. So tonight, the purpose of the session is to really create some dialogue and to do some kind of mini skills-based exercises to have a discussion about how reds and blues can work together. So we're going to try to show how you can build empathy with certain questions that you can ask of another person, and also how you can create, after you have empathy, how you can hopefully start talking about ways of improving the polarization that might be happening. So tonight, and I've already spent about my length of time in this next slide in terms of the agenda. So Glenn, if you can put the next slide up, we've already done a welcome and kind of introductions. I'll talk a little bit about through Zoom and ground rules here shortly. But we're going to start out with a poll after I do that. And then Glenn's going to talk about 15 or 20 minutes about some research that's been done related to COVID-19 pandemics and polarization. Then we're going to spend some time in some breakout groups, and probably a member of like 4 or 5 people in a room, in which you can actually get to know some of the people that are here a little bit better. And when you're in those breakout rooms, you don't have to identify yourself as red or blue, but we will be asking questions related to your experiences with the pandemic, so that you can kind of experience, choose to share what you would like to related to that. Then we'll discuss that and provide a wrap up and ways of getting involved with our organization. So for those of you who might be new to Zoom, and I don't know if there are any of you that are, but just in case, along the bottom of your screen, or sometimes in a more button, if you're with a, or dot button, if you're with a iPad or with a phone, you will come across something that looks like this mute start video, invite participants, share screen, that kind of bar. And the mute button is where you can go in and actually mute yourself, but all of you have had some experience with that tonight because we've given you some practice. Participants is where you can see who else is in the call. The chat button is where you can actually ask questions. And if you have specific questions, for example, to Jeannie, who's the Ask Me participant person, then you can directly go to her if you want. She will actually be monitoring the chat box as we go through as well and letting us know. There is an opportunity also, usually in the participants, if you open up that particular window, for you to raise your hand if you have a question. If it's in the middle of something that we're doing, then Jeannie may actually ask you what the question is. But there will be time for questions and answers, questions and discussion as we move through. And so then we will be telling you to raise your hand if you would like to talk. So let's go through really quickly what the goals are for Braver Angels, and then I'll turn it over to Glenn. So we really want to encourage respect. And we believe that to encourage respect, we really have to build relationships. And relationships are built around listening, around really showing the other person that you think that they're valuable, humanizing them as a person. In order to do that, we have to spend time. And those kinds of relationships and working together actually help us be able to change political behavior. I picked up a book recently called I Don't Agree With You, But I Guess I'll Listen to You, or something like that. It was written by a red and a blue person who actually have a podcast that they do together, and they were sorority sisters in college. And it's been interesting because I've been reading that, and they really have made a difference in their community in Kentucky where they are living, because they've been able to get beyond just the differences that were apparent on social media. So our goal is to increase understanding, not all that we have to agree with each other, to really engage with people who are different than us and get out of our lane and out of our tribe, and to support principles like listening and recognizing our biases. Next month, we're going to actually have a skills workshop on bridging the divide using listening behaviors and communicating behaviors that Glenn's going to be leading. We'll talk about that at the end of our session tonight, but I hope that you'll be able to join us and invite a friend as well to that. We have some ground rules. You can read them. I don't need to read them off to you, but you can see them there on the screen, and we'll bring those up again when we get ready to go into our breakout rooms.
What I'm going to do is just spend about 15 minutes kind of giving highlights of a few things. There's a lot of research out already and polls and that sort of thing about COVID-19. So I'm just going to hit a couple of high points and cover some other things that'll help us as we get into the breakout rooms. First, people in general, human beings, the way our bodies and brains are designed, we're really good at handling emergencies and crises when they're short term. One thing about it, though, we're not designed to handle things that last a long time that are a crisis. And when that happens, when something kind of becomes chronic and drags on, we tend to go back to the old ways we were doing things. We start getting more complacent. And important for this group is we start falling back into the old habits of the way we think and the way we react according to the tribe we think we belong to. And that we've seen that played out in the several months since March when we first had the pandemic announced, and we see now things dividing significantly between parties, so that people in one party tend to have a very different view of COVID-19 and various aspects of it than the people in the other party. Pew Research Foundation periodically does polls on politics in America and other things, and one of the things they just found out, this is just from a couple of weeks back, they've shown that while there were still some differences early on, but there was a lot more similarity. Now, the two parties, Republicans and Democrats, are significantly different in how they view various aspects of COVID. I've got a few listed here. There's one, just the degree of concern you have about how big a deal COVID is. Big difference in how it's viewed, depending on party. The degree to which it poses a significant health risk, even the extent to which COVID is infectious. Those are things that the opinions of people differ dramatically depending on which party they ally with or whether they're liberal or conservative. Other things include how well they perceive the health of the current economy. If it's good, if it's bad, in the middle, there's a big difference of perception there. There's a big difference in terms of how they assess the safety situation for being out and about. That would include things like masks and the need for that. There's even a big gap in how different groups perceive the need for public assistance as a result of the COVID virus. Now, those of you who maybe have heard some of my presentations in the past will know a little bit about this, but most of us like to think that when we make decisions and we come to an opinion and we have beliefs and we decide what we're going to act on, we tend to think that we're very thoughtful and rational and that we do things based on what we think is right. Actually, it turns out the research has been very strong for a number of years in the social sciences, not just about this, but about anything, that people are influenced by many factors, many of them not even that they're aware of. They engage in irrational beliefs. They make emotionally based decisions. Most of those below the level of conscious awareness. They think they're being thoughtful and using facts when in fact there are other things influencing it. That's a whole nother presentation, so I won't go into that, but just know that's the case. And so what that does, among other things, is it increases polarization when you get into an area where people disagree between groups. And the more people get polarized, the more the populace at large is susceptible to misinformation, also known as fake news. People are more likely to be sucked in by fake news than if they had a nuanced, view of a variety of things. As a result of that, unfortunately, it means that the quality of our decisions about how to behave and what we believe is going to be less than ideal because we're basing a lot of our decisions on things that don't really fit the reality. And that's going to have implications for our physical health, our economic health, and how we are as a society and getting along with each other. And I think that helps explain some of the things that we've seen in recent months. Some of the things that I was talking about that contribute to how we view things and how we make decisions, one of the most common ones you hear about is tribalism, which is simply which group do we identify with. You think about, we talk about with teenagers and peer pressure. Well, same thing. You have a group that you identify with, and so you start taking all your cues about how to behave and what to believe from what the majority of that group, how they lead you to believe that. So that a lot of influence comes from that. One that's less well known is disgust. And I thought that was particularly appropriate since we're talking about a disease, a potentially deadly disease. Social scientists who research this area perceive disgust to be one of the primary emotions, just like happiness, sadness, and anger, and that sort of thing. Disgust seems to be something that was evolved over the millennia to help us avoid disease by kind of having a yuck factor. If we encounter something in our environment that looks kind of yucky, smells funky, that kind of thing, then we would avoid it. And that helps us to not get sick. Interestingly enough, our brain actually does something similar for non-physical entities. One psychologist calls it a behavioral immune system, and what it does is the brain basically attacks ideas that are different from the ones that we strongly hold to. It treats foreign thoughts or different thoughts as if they're a disease to be avoided and shunned because they'll cause bad things to happen. And then as a result, it tends to push us toward places of polarization. And when people get polarized, their views tend to be more extreme than they might otherwise. And one thing we know from research is that when people have extreme political beliefs, they become more vulnerable to being manipulated through fake news or misinformation, especially if that information is going to confirm their previously held beliefs, then they're say, oh yeah, that's right, I totally buy into that. Even if it's a patently false or easily detected misleading kind of thing, they're more susceptible to that. Now, David Brooks is a conservative columnist who is one of my favorites. He is a really thoughtful guy, and he made it the point in one of his most recent books about the issue of competing goods. He talks about politics being a competition between partial truths. What happens is people on opposite sides of the political fence tend to go in one direction or the other on some idea. An example here with COVID. One of the big things you hear an argument about is, well, we need to pay attention mainly to the health of our citizens, so let's shut everything down. And then the other side is, it's going to be fine, don't worry about the health. We got to deal with the economy. Well, the truth is, both of those factors are very important, and they are good values. What happens is they, like many other values, tend to have some competing tendencies, so that if you go more in one direction, the other one goes down. So it becomes a balancing act where you're trying to find the right point of balance between competing goods. To do that, you need to be able to consider multiple ideas, not just those of the group that you identify with. So it's not a winner-take-all approach, it's a balancing act. And here's some others that I think you'll recognize come up in the COVID discussion. On one side is the idea of having government rules and government enforcement, the idea of maybe shutting things down or requirements to wear a mask in public, for instance. The other side of it is individual decisions. Both of those are good, but they work against each other. Same thing with science and expert opinion as opposed to group beliefs and values. If the science and the experts say one thing, but your group says something else, you get into big competition, you tend to denigrate the other side and build up your side and fail to appreciate how both sides are really important and have something good to contribute. And then the other one I think you recognize is group safety versus individual rights. What's good for the group versus what's good for the individual. And I add this last little point here. This I think is important. That has long been recognized that in Eastern versus Western cultures, you see a big difference there, because Eastern cultures, like in Asia, have historically had cultures where there's more of an emphasis on group and the communitarian view of things, what's good for the group. And so people are predisposed to think more highly of group values. In the West, particularly in the US, maybe more than Europe, there's a strong emphasis on individualism and individual rights. So that tends to be the me culture as opposed to the other we culture. It's not that one's right and one's wrong. Both of them are very valid, important values, but they work against each other when you go too much in one direction or another. So again, balance is a key. So how can we then try to base our beliefs and our behaviors on information that we can rely on, and how can we do this in a way where we cooperate with each other? That's a long answer that I'm not going to get into. I'm just going to give you maybe 6 or so ideas before you go into the breakout room. The first is easier said than done, but it is the determination on your part that you will be more open to hearing other ideas than those that you subscribe to. In other words, try not to be threatened emotionally by hearing somebody espouse a value or a position different than yours. Another thing is, and this is really important these days in social media and all the misinformation out there, is to do your best to seek out sound information. And one way to do that is make sure you have a variety of sources and that your sources have been vetted in a number of ways by different people, so you have some sense of faith and confidence that they are offering a balanced viewpoint based on solid facts as much as possible. You'll probably never get rid entirely of opinion and unconscious bias and influence, but as much as possible, going by the value of what is known to be true, what you have evidence for, that kind of thing. And then here's an interesting thing I just saw just a couple of weeks ago. There's some research about how to deal with fake news. And this sounds really simple. It sounds common sense, and it is, but it turned out in research to be helpful. It's called a priming effect, which basically is this. Before you start to consume something in the media, maybe read a newspaper article or look at something on social media, kind of consciously remind yourself that you are going to use your higher level thinking skills and your values to look carefully at what you're about to experience and consume in media, and look to see, does this seem accurate, or do I detect any tendency to try to manipulate me through emotion or manipulation of some sort? And just that one thing of trying to look for the accuracy of things sets you up to be more aware of things and more open to finding little flaws in people's reasoning. Okay, so some other things. If you're going to talk to someone with a different viewpoint than you, and I encourage you to be thinking about these as you go into the breakouts. I think we'll actually have something on the chat that'll list all these for you. Try to listen to understand others. Now, I know most of us, what we tend to do when we're hearing someone with a different viewpoint, we're already analyzing where we think they went wrong and what we're going to say to dispute that. Here, let's put that aside for a moment and just simply try to understand where the other person's coming from and why they think that way. Be genuinely curious about what they think and why they think that way. And then as April was kind of getting at the beginning, we're wanting to do what we can to build relationships. So focus on communicating with the other person or people rather than focusing on trying to persuade them to come over to your side, because most of the time that doesn't really happen. But if you communicate in a respectful way, you'll start to build a relationship. And the one thing more than anything else that's predictive of people getting together and starting to have some common views is building a positive relationship. And then you look for areas of agreement. This is one thing that Braver Angels does a lot. We're looking for ways to find common ground. So when you're listening to that person, try to notice something they say that you can agree with, and then where you can comment on it and say, yeah, I agree with that. That point I definitely agree with you on. Then the final thing, this is just a caution, because sometimes when you're getting into discussions with people on politics, it can be very emotional, and you have to be really careful. And we all know this because we've been there and done that. Hurtful comments cannot be undone. If you get emotional and angry about something, you can say something that is hurtful, or it arouses the other person's defensiveness, and that hurts the relationship. It makes them less likely to hear you. So it's not a good thing. So that involves some self-censoring that you have to do. And then finally, this is kind of a preview of what's coming up in September 14th, the next time we meet, when we're going to do these skills for speaking across the divide. These are 3 listening skills. And so I encourage you to get ready for that September 14th one, but try using these 3. Some of you have probably heard of the paraphrasing idea, also called active listening. What you're doing there, when you listen to a person say something, instead of coming back with your opinion, try to restate in your own words what you just heard them say. And that helps you to better understand what they're saying, and it helps them to get a better sense that they're being listened to, and that helps the relationship. Now, usually you're just paraphrasing content, but it can also be helpful if you listen to, so if they believe that, that seems to indicate that their value is this. And you maybe comment. So it sounds like you then, something really important to you is fairness in this whole issue. So both content and values, paraphrase it, give it back to them. And then asking questions rather than stating your own opinion. There's a place for stating your own opinion, but try initially to work on questioning the other side to understand where they're coming from. That means genuine questions of understanding, not what we call gotcha questions. And the gotcha questions, that's kind of like, when did you stop beating your wife, right? There's no good answer, whatever you come up with that. It's implied something negative about you. It creates defensiveness, and then the relationship's backed off on. It's not good. So those are 3 listening skills that if you want to have a successful, or at least improve your chances of having a positive conversation with someone on the other side politically, try to use those. So I encourage you to use those in the breakout room, which is about to happen. So just a reminder, as you're in there, try to be open. Even people who maybe are both on the same side politically are inevitably going to have some things where they disagree. So be open to what the other person has to say, listen carefully, and use questions to learn where they're coming from.
Well, we're about out of time here, getting to at the end of our time. These have been a wonderful discussion and questions. Glenn, you want to talk about kind of what we have coming up on the slides there?
I will once I unmute. Okay, so if you want to see, I'm going to try to spread things on our Braver Angels page, which I'll get to in a moment. But CAL's Central Arkansas Library System, if you look under events and classes, you'll find descriptions and links of our programs for the rest of the year. The one I keep harping out because it's the next one, I think it's a biggie, is the skills workshop. And yes?
I just wanted to clarify, Glenn, it's not going to be on the CAL's system. It's probably going to be more on the CAL's main library Facebook page.
Okay, we may need to change that link then. But so then maybe contact us, or you'll see the email address for me in April shortly to get more information, or you may find it on the main library page. At any rate, the September 14th, we're going to do a skills workshop. And in order to do that and participate in the breakout rooms, you first have to go online and complete a 40-minute skills training online on the Braver Angels website nationally. Now, what I don't know is normally up until recently, you had to join Braver Angels to be able to have access to that. I don't know if that's still true or not, but if you do have to join, hey, it's just $12 a year. So I would encourage you to come do that and learn some of the skills that we teach nationwide about talking across the political divide. And then October 5th, these are all Mondays, by the way. October 5th, we'll have a panel discussion. Me, April, and Jerry are going to talk about various aspects of polarization. I think Mary is going to be the moderator and kind of help us with questions to kind of elicit some of our thoughts, and because we each come from slightly different places in our research we've done on polarization, and we'll have Q&A afterwards. Then in November on the 2nd, I believe April, that'll be you, right? And as well as December, where you'll be talking in November about with malice toward none, which we mentioned earlier. And that's going to be focusing on how you can have one-to-one conversations across the political divide. And that's going to be really important after the election, because as we've noted, it doesn't matter who wins ultimately in this next election in November, approximately half the country is going to be devastated and angry and emotional and everything else. So if we're going to not degenerate into a bad place in this country, we have to have a critical mass of people who are going to be able to continue to have a respectful conversation with people on the other side. And that's what we want to do regardless of what happens. And then in December, Depolarizing Within workshop. And that's the kind of workshop where you learn how your own behavior and your own beliefs and your own conversations within your tribe can actually contribute to depolarization and give you chances to work on that. So if you want to get involved, first step I'd say is go to our national website, braverangels.org, and join for $12 a year. And that gives you access to a lot of things, including that 40-minute skills online training. In fact, I'd encourage you right now, if you're interested, text to this number, 66866, the letters BA, and they'll send you a link to join. And then you can always attend these meetings. We're going to try to have some other workshops and events. Eventually, we're happy to talk to different civic organizations and churches and the like. Those who are interested, let us know. We can do that. Of course, we won't do it in person for now. We'll be doing it via Zoom. And then just what you can do on your own is do what you can to use these principles to reduce polarization, and then go from there and just help spread the word about what we're doing, because we could use some help and some other people involved. Here's how to get in touch with us. There's the national website, braverangels.org. Here's the email for me and for April. Get in touch with us if you have any questions, or if you want to get the link for any of the subsequent programs or anything. You can also look on Facebook, search for Braver Angels Arkansas, or at Braver Angels Arkansas. And we even have a YouTube channel that has a couple of videos, but we're a little slow moving on that. So that is it.